Grace and peace. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, we gather today in the sure and certain hope of the resurrection, to give thanks to God for the life of David Baker, to receive the comfort of the Holy Spirit, and to proclaim the good news of eternal life in Jesus Christ. Listen to these words from the Holy Scriptures, from the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 25 and 26. I am the resurrection and the life, says the Lord. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. And from John 14, verse 27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. And finally, from Romans 14, verse 8. If we live to the Lord. And if we die to the Lord. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we belong to the Lord. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O God, who gave us birth, you are ever more ready to hear than we are to pray. You know our needs before we ask, and our ignorance in asking. Show us now your grace, that as we face the mystery of death, we may see the light of eternity. Speak to us once more your solemn message of life and death. Help us to live as those who are prepared to die. And when our days here are ended, enable us to die as those who go forth to live, so that living or dying, our life may be in Jesus Christ, our risen Lord. Amen. I invite you to stand as we sing together a botanist hymn, Hymn of Promise, hymn number 250, which you don't have in front of you, but the words will be on the screen.
In the bulb there is a flower, in the seed an apple tree, in cocoons a hidden promise, butterflies will soon be free. In the cold and snow of winter, there's a spring that waits to be unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. There's a song in every silence, seeking word and melody. There's a dawn in every darkness, bringing hope to you and me. From the past will come the future, what it holds a mystery, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. In our end is our beginning, in our time infinity, in our doubt there is believing, in our life eternity, in our death a resurrection, at the last a victory, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see.
Our grandpa taught us many things, among them the importance of patience, kindness, and love. Those lessons are embodied in the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, which grandpa cherished. He had a framed copy of that chapter written in calligraphy by his cousin. which hung on the wall of the old house and then above his dresser at the condo for the last 5 years. At a moment like this, it seems appropriate to share such lessons.
1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 through 3. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing.
Let us now ask God to cleanse our hearts, to redeem our memories, and to renew our confidence in the goodness of God. Let us pray. Holy and merciful God, you see us as we are and know our innermost thoughts. We confess that we are unworthy of your gracious care. We forget that all life comes from you and that to you all life returns. We do not always live as your grateful children, nor do we always love as Christ loved us. Only your grace can sustain us through our good times and bad times. Lord, in your mercy, forgive us, heal us, and make us whole. Set us free from our sin and restore to us the joy of your salvation, now and forever. Amen. My friends, in Jesus Christ, we are forgiven and made new. Thanks be to God.
Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things.
Do we have Tom's reading of Psalm 23, Terry, at this time? As he is preparing that, I will go ahead and read water scriptures. Good, there we go, Psalm 23.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house.
It's been a blessing to be receiving all of the grandchildren reading these scriptures so they can be incorporated into today's service. Something we wouldn't have even thought about doing in the past, and now we can do that, and we're grateful. So as I said just a minute ago, water scriptures. Mr. Water, Dr. Waterlab, it was interesting. I was at Bailiwick's getting a cup of coffee on Monday, and his obituary came out, and somebody was reading it, and they said, oh, a Heidelberg professor passed away. And somebody else said, who? And she said, hold on just a minute. And she looked down and she said, the water quality lab guy. So how wonderful to consider then all the different scriptures about water and to listen to the story of God through creation and water. So I'm just going to read a little handful of water scriptures before I reflect on Dave's life today. Genesis 1 verse 2. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. 2 Samuel 22 verse 17. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of the deep waters. Psalm 63 verse 1. You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. Isaiah 12, verse 3. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. Isaiah 43, verse 2. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. Isaiah 44, verse 3. For I will pour water on the thirsty land and streams on the dry ground. I will pour out my spirit on your offspring and my blessing on your descendants. Amos 5, verse 24. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Matthew 10, 42. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. John 3, 5. Jesus answered, very truly I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless they are born of water and the Spirit. John 4, 13 through 15, Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I will give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water, welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, Sir, give me this water so I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. And finally, Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 and 2. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. There's no way to speak about David Baker without mentioning water. And there's no way to speak about his life without recognizing that for him, theology and science are tightly woven together into a delicate cloth of revelation. Science enlightening the understanding of God, and his understanding of God illuminating the purpose of science for the stewardship and care of all of creation. In fact, when I first met Dave and had the chance to listen as he shared his faith with me, I was fascinated because without using a single theological word, he showed me God's presence through the intricate nature of creation. Just look, he said. Look at the harmony of how it is intended to work together. He would mention the tiniest organism barely visible under a microscope and the vast universe beyond vision. And even as he spoke with scientific words and insights, I was drawn into the vision cast by this man of deep faith. Dave was a spiritual contemplative whose work in the lab was in response to God's call to stewardship of the earth. In 1982, the Presbyterian Church, USA, this denomination here, put out this statement on science and theology, and as I read it, I couldn't help but see and hear Dave and how he lived and experienced his faith-filled life. As far as creation is concerned, theology tells us, or should tell us, or at least help us to learn what the purpose of humankind and creation is. It answers questions concerning the ultimate purpose of human life, which according to the Westminster Catechism is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Science, by which we attempt to understand nature in terms of itself, how it is ordered and how it is or ought to be arranged, is a prime means by which we may faithfully glorify God here and now. It is the most important instrumentality through which we learn about and care for nature, even as in faithfulness we look forward to enjoying God forever. Using poetic license, we may say that if theology is to proclaim, as did Amos, that justice should roll down as waters and righteousness as an ever-flowing stream, science, including applied science technology, learns about, charts out, and furnishes channels for the flow. Thus, theology orients life to God and God's purposes. Science provides the thought and practical dimensions by which this orientation becomes concrete with regard to our physical world. Theology and natural science, though oriented to different objects, theology to God and science to nature, have common concerns. If they are to be effective and directed rightly, they ought not only to recognize one another's importance, they ought consciously to be in dialogue with one another and even depend upon one another. To know David Baker was to enter into this unspoken dialogue between science and theology and science. About a month ago, during one of his hospital stints, I sat down with him and asked him about the beginnings of the Water Quality Lab, and he told me that it began as a chance to get intro-level biology students to do some hands-on work. So they sampled water. I'm sure Ken Krieger will tell you more about this, or you can read about it in Ken Baker's book at the lab. But what struck me was the humility of Dr. Baker's explanation of the work that he had done. It was his family who shared with me the great impacts the Water Quality Lab has not only on the Great Lakes, but also on water research throughout the world. But as Dave described it, the work he was doing was not at all so he could make a name for himself, but rather so that he could turn students into scientists who focused on what he believed was the core reason for his existence, caring for the whole creation, the way in which he glorified God and enjoyed God forever. As I read through the many water scriptures today, I recognized all in Dave that represented his true nature and his deep faith. I recognized his deep longing to know more and more of God and enjoy more of God as he explored more and more of God's creation, not only looking under microscopes and traveling to different bodies of water, but also as he walked through the parks and noticed wildflowers and budding trees and advocated for the stewardship of the earth with the FELC. I also recognized his deep compassion and his longing to help people find freedom from systemic oppression. And in true Dave form, he determined to care for one individual at a time, doing everything he possibly could to open up a more caring and compassionate world to them. This is who he was. Susan will mention in a few minutes that originally Dave wanted to be a minister, but the path he took in response to God's call on his life ended up looking more like the monks who retreated to study God and nature. The difference is that Dave didn't withdraw from his fellow humans unless he was writing a paper. Rather, in a very Jesus kind of way, he lived among us, loving one person at a time, changing one life at a time, listening to one silenced voice at a time, and caring deeply about each life sent his way. He believed what was possible for each person, even if they could not or would not believe that for themselves. Some might call this foolish, but I recognize it as faithful. Now, I know that you are here, either in person or watching through YouTube or Facebook, because Dave's life touched yours in some way or another. Peg, I know you knew him best. You knew his quirks and his generous love and poetic, melodic spirit. But others gathered today were touched by his life as well. Maybe your family, and you have stories galore of his sly comic remarks or his deep, compassionate understanding. Maybe you're a friend who had the opportunity to sing with him or be listened to by him. Maybe you, like me, know him through the church and know the depth of his comments when given a chance to speak. Maybe you're a colleague through Heidelberg or the Water Lab, and you were able to glimpse that while data mattered deeply, so did honesty and integrity. Or maybe you were loved along the way, exactly as you were, with hope for who you could become, and that kind of love changed your mindset. Give thanks to God for being present to you in such a way through this man. The Christian life is about allowing the Christ to live uniquely through each one of us with this compassionate love for all of creation. As I look at Dave's life, I can't help but see that Dave did just that, and that God was with us through Dave's life. And now, even as Dave's body has failed, the life of God continues to turn the decay of winter into life reborn, both for Dave and for each one of us who's been blessed by him on the way. Dave tasted living water a long time ago, and that river of life continues to flow through his resurrected veins and into our souls. So may we join him in glorifying God and enjoying him forever. Thanks be to God. Amen.
My grandfather was a scientist who found God in nature. This was a favorite poem. At one time, he asked Grandma, who was traveling with Pat Hilmer to England, to bring him a picture of a flower in a crannied wall. Flower in the Crannied Wall by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Flower in the crannied wall, I pluck you out of the crannies. I hold you here, root and all, in my hand. Little flower, but if I could understand what you are, root and all in all, I should know what God and man is.
Good morning. Is this working? Good. I really appreciated hearing that poem just now because it reminds me of some crannies in the cliffs at Shavers Fork in West Virginia that I got to see on occasion. It was really meaningful. The departure of David B. Baker from our midst leaves an empty place in our hearts, and we thank God that we could all be part of his life. But Dave has left us much to celebrate. I am particularly grateful that I can share my perspectives on his life this morning because he strongly influenced my life and my family's life over the last 43 years. And I also witnessed the large impact Dave had on the lives of many others. It is really impossible to summarize Dave's life adequately in a few minutes. He was a man of many dimensions and many accomplishments. His professional life and community involvement were eloquently presented online last Saturday in the remarks of Heidelberg's president, Dr. Rob Huntington. Dave's lasting mark on scientists and policymakers in the Great Lakes community was summarized on Tuesday in the Toledo Blade. And it took 238 pages for biology professor Ken Baker to present Dr. Dave Baker's accomplishments and those of the research laboratory that Dave founded in his excellent and comprehensive book that's already been referred to. It's called the National Center for Water Quality Research at Heidelberg University, 1969 through 2019. How then, in a few words, do I describe the man who is my friend and colleague? First, how have others described Dave? This morning we've already heard some attributes, some adjectives given to Dave. In the tributes to Dave during this past week, one reads attributes such as patient, kind, generous, soft-spoken, faithful, well-loved, encouraging, inspirational, passionate and compassionate, sparkling with dedication and never-ending enthusiasm, dedicated to science, wonderful collaborator, attentive to detail, internationally respected, and creative thinker whose mind never rested. Can one man have all these attributes? Dave did. I will elaborate briefly on a few of these traits as I witnessed them and add some others from three perspectives that I have of his life as a scientist educator, as a man of faith, and as a citizen of Tiffin and the greater community. As a scientist educator, Dave's professional network was expansive, extending from multinational to local agencies and to university scientists and public policy makers throughout the Great Lakes region and overseas. My observations were that Dave always made a positive and lasting impression on audiences who heard his scientific presentations and those who collaborated with him. In his role as teacher, Dave hosted the post-commencement West Virginia field trips, the biology and geology class, for many years at the A-frame on Shavers Fork, and that class formed some of the fondest memories that many students have of Heidelberg. I would also describe Dave as a visionary. He was always looking at the big picture, the big research picture, and would often approach the lab staff with the question, what if? I'm hearing chuckles. Because the staff knew that what if really meant we should, and that we'd be adding a new project to the already full water chemistry sampling schedule. But I believe it was Dave's vision that enabled the National Center for Water Quality Research to thrive and expand into additional research areas over the decades. Dave was also adaptive and persuasive. These traits made it possible for Dave to sustain funding for the lab among constantly changing government priorities and programs. A really stressful existence, but Dave managed it. I would further describe Dave as persistent. To everyone who would listen, Dave explained the powerful impact of excessive phosphorus in its different forms on aquatic environments. And Dave continued talking to some of his visitors about phosphorus literally right up to this month. And talk about persistence. How many professors maintain their professional relationships and are still writing manuscripts well into their 80s? Very few. But Dave did, until about 2 weeks ago. Dave certainly was passionate about his professional calling. I would add, too, that Dave was humble and unassuming. Pastor Katie already referred to some of that. He never boasted about himself when talking about the accomplishments of the lab. It was always we. And he was quick to give credit to the lab staff in his public presentations. Part of his success in working with farmers and policymakers, I believe, is that he did not present himself as pompous because he had a PhD. Instead, he earnestly attempted to understand environmental issues affecting the agricultural community from their perspectives as well. But Dave's life certainly had dimensions outside his profession. He also demonstrated a strong Christian faith, as Pastor Katie just talked about. Allow me to mention just some of the activities I know about. For 5 decades at least, Dave sang in the back row of the choir with Peg in the middle or front row here in this sanctuary. Perhaps because Dave was an alumnus of the Heidelberg Concert Choir, he was always on pitch and was a quick sight reader. He and Peg were among the most dependable choir members, and in later years often supplied the only bass or alto on Sunday mornings. Dave and Peg both regularly attended Sunday school over the years. My recollection is that Dave's input in discussions was occasional, but when he raised a point, it was always well considered. Dave also served on the church board, which we call the session, as an elder, serving multiple 3-year terms on the mission, stewardship, and administrative committees. Dave and Peg also participated in church retreats, the last one I think only 2 years ago at Camp Kirkmont near Bell Fountain. Both Dave and Peg were members of the Couplers Club here, which we later call the People Enjoying People, and they took part in events ranging from mystery dinners to talent shows. They've also volunteered for with Habitat for Humanity, and he and Peg took trips with other church members to build houses in Mississippi. And I'm sure I'm missing quite a few other activities that Dave was involved in here at the church. Finally, there is the matter of Dave's friendship and community contributions. I consider Dave to be my close friend. We seem to think alike in many ways. We played tennis for years. We once wandered through the woods named after him along the Sandusky River over on Riverside Drive, naming the plants growing there. And we did a number of other things. We crossed paths frequently on the Heidelberg track, I think even back when it was a cinder track, where Dave was well known for his speed walking. Dave and Peg were founding members of the Heidelberg University Community Chorus and stayed active until the pandemic interfered with that in the last year. Dave was also a current member of the Board of Trustees of the Franciscan Earth Literacy Center here in Tiffin. And he was even found on occasion on the Ritz stage. Some of my most memorable times with Dave, and again Peg, relate to their hospitality and their kindness. Many years they hosted cookouts with volleyball, that should be badminton, and beanbag toss at their house for the lab staff and the student workers. And it really brought us all closer together. By far the most memorable occasions were the Christmas white elephant parties for lab staff and science faculty started by the Bakers long before Sue and I arrived in 1978, where we exchanged unwanted items as gifts. Several of those gifts were extremely memorable, and some resurfaced without warning year after year. Let me mention 3. One was the aardvark, which originated with the Bakers, had a Velcro tongue that you pushed a bulb on the end of a stick, and the tongue would stick out and grab a stuffed felt termite. It survived several generations through the years, being exchanged through the white elephant parties, and it might still be around. It was down to 1 termite, the last we know. And then there was the grass skirt with coconuts that I was unfortunate to unwrap. And there are still photos that resurface around the lab periodically, showing me modeling those. And then the electric fork, which we never plugged in. Those were the occasions when I think I saw Dave the most relaxed and laughed the most. To summarize, it may be an understatement to say that Dave lived an exceptional life. He was a pillar in his profession, in the church, and in the community. He had a way of making his lab staff and friends feel like part of his extended family. And undoubtedly, much of what Dave accomplished over the years, Peg, was because of your enduring support and encouragement. Dave continued to be a role model for us, all of us, even as he continued to celebrate many memories with his visitors this past month. To the very end, Dave showed us how to live a productive and exemplary life, truly a life of purpose with distinction.
We want to thank you for being part of Dad's service today, in person and online. The support of friends and the Tiffin community has been overwhelming. The kindnesses, the notes, the visits, the meals, the driving, the shopping, the sitting in the ER until 3 in the morning. We are so grateful to you all. Sarah and Mark and I have also been grateful that we've been able to spend so much time with Mom and Dad these last few months. Our father was a scientist, a naturalist. He went to Heidelberg to become a minister, but instead accepted his calling to be a steward of the earth. He shared his love of nature with us throughout his life. As children, we hiked many trails, noting the spring wildflowers and Christmas bird counts, picking raspberries and blueberries for pancakes, identifying animal tracks and which fern was which. He taught us to fish and canoe and hike and to appreciate the natural beauty around us. As Grandpa, he filled his grandchildren with experiences in the outdoors, taking them on many vacations to some of our favorite places, including Hilmer's Island in Quebec, and the cabin in West Virginia. Tom remembers fishing with Grandpa from a canoe in Canada and discovering a gull that was tangled up in a fishing line. Dad gently and expertly, at least in Tom's eyes, freed the bird. I remember Robert's enthusiasm as a young boy about scrambling up the Toolik waterfalls in West Virginia with Dad and saying it was the best thing ever, better than Disney. Mom and Dad made it a point to take the grandchildren on intergenerational elder hostel adventures to Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, Lake Superior, and Ontario. And Maggie was fortunate enough to be able to spend a summer living with them and working as an intern in the lab. During Dad's last few years, he was honored to be part of the Franciscan Earth Literacy Center board. Dad was a kind, patient, and loving father. One memory stands out to me. As a little girl, probably 4, I used to draw the same picture over and over. It was the one with the little house and the smiling sunshine and the apple tree and the little girl. One time, I drew that picture on the bookshelves in the dining room. And my daddy asked, "Susie, is this your picture?" And I said, "No." He didn't say anything more, but the next day he brought home a pile of old computer paper from Heidelberg, the kind that was perforated, and he told me that I could draw on the paper whenever I wanted to. He loved us tenderly. Dad was thorough. Not only did the scientist in him insist on washing the dishes well, which included washing them before they went in the dishwasher, but he also loved thoroughly. Whenever a need came up, he looked at it calmly and decided on the best or kindest course of action, which might include dropping what he was doing in the moment and helping a friend bury a dog or immersing himself in a charity. He liked to understand a problem and come up with a thorough solution. I think he was an exemplary patient. Throughout his illnesses over the last 20 years, Dad built strong relationships with his doctors, Vela, Skeel, Tita, Nelson. Never complaining, he would seek to understand his condition from a scientific perspective. Dad was always grateful and followed the doctor's advice, bouncing back again and again. To many people, maybe including Dad, his identity came through his work at the lab. As kids, he was just Dad to us. We always felt attended to and loved. He was the one who removed our splinters, made the Saturday morning pancakes, attended countless sporting events and concerts and plays, worked endlessly in the yard, sang in the church choir and community chorus, rehearsed lines with us, threw the football, played badminton and ping pong, and could walk faster than anybody else. Dad and Mom made a happy home for us on Riverside Drive across from the Sandusky River, his inspiration. We remember many instances with Dad laughing so hard at something that Mom was reading aloud, maybe something from Patrick McManus or Robert Fulghum, such as Never Sniff a Gift Fish, or All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Anyway, he'd laugh so hard that he was blinded by tears and gasping for breath, even when driving. Dad was our example of hard work, integrity, humility, and always love. His last clear words to us were, "I love you all." We were really lucky to have had such a dad.
Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away.
Let us pray. O God, before whom generations rise and pass away, we praise you for all your servants who, having lived this life in faith, now live eternally with you. Especially, we thank you for your servant, Dave, whose baptism is now complete in death. We praise you for the gift of his life, for all in him that was good and kind and faithful, for the grace you gave him that kindled in him the love of your dear name and enabled him to serve you faithfully. We thank you now that for him death is past and pain has ended, and that he has now entered the joy that you have prepared. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And now, with the confidence of the children of God, let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Corinthians chapter 13, verses 11 through 13. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, but the greatest of these is love.
Let us pray. O God, you only are immortal, the creator and maker of all, and we are mortal, formed of the earth, and to earth shall we return. This you ordained when you created us, saying, "You are dust, and to dust you shall return." All of us go down to the dust, and yet even at the grave we make our song, Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. Give rest, O Christ, to your servant with all your saints, where there is neither pain nor sorrow nor sighing, but life everlasting. Amen. I invite you to stand as we commend Dave's body to God. Into your hands, O merciful Savior, we commend your servant, David Baker. Acknowledge, we humbly pray, a sheep of your own flock, a lamb of your own flock, a sinner of your own redeeming. Receive him into the arms of your mercy, into the blessed rest of everlasting peace, and into the glorious company of the saints in light. Amen. In Luke 2, we hear a beautiful song of Simeon that we also like to pray at the end of memorial services. Now, Lord, let your servant go in peace. Your word has been fulfilled. My own eyes have seen the salvation which you have prepared in the sight of every people, a light to reveal you to the nations and the glory of your people Israel. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Receive this blessing. Now may the courage of the early morning's dawning, the strength of the eternal hills and wide open fields and the silent streams, the beauty of the flowered gardens, the love that makes the family and that alone can build the peace of the world, the life that is Christ, and the peace of the evening's ending and of the midnight be with you now and forever. Listen as the Heidelberg Community Choir sings an old Irish blessing. Please be seated. Before the final song is played, I want to invite all of you on behalf of the family to the Gilmore Hall atrium, where there will be a reception in Dave's memory and celebration with stories. All of you are invited as soon as the service is over. We also are going to finish with the song, "Now Thank We All Our God." And Rachel will be playing this on the organ, and this song was played as the recessional at Peg and Dave's wedding. And so we're going to have the family stay during this last song so they can celebrate his life as well. And then the funeral home will escort the family out, and then everyone else can follow from there. Peace be with you.